wildest revenge you've ever gotten on your cheating partner? It all started with the most humiliating night of his life. Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk about someone very special to me. Someone whose loyalty and honesty have shaped our relationship in ways I never expected. 300 faces stared back at me from the hotel ballroom. My boyfriend, Ben, sat at the front table, his company badge glinting under the spotlights, completely unaware of what I was about to unleash. His boss nodded encouragingly from the next table over. The annual award ceremony was in full swing, and I'd convinced the event organizers to let me give a special appreciation speech for my devoted boyfriend. Ben smiled that charming smile that had fooled me for months. He had no idea I knew about Rebecca. He had no idea I'd spent weeks planning this moment, crafting every word to maximum effect. The crowd leaned in, expecting a typical sappy girlfriend tribute. Ben Crawford has been in my life for 2 years, I continued, watching his face for any flicker of concern. Nothing yet. And in that time, he's shown me exactly who he really is. His dedication to his work here is remarkable. He stays late so many nights, puts in weekend hours, always texting about projects and deadlines. A few people nodded knowingly. Ben's coworkers probably thought he was as committed as I'd been led to believe. The irony wasn't lost on me. His communication skills are truly something to behold. Ben can make anyone believe anything he says. He's mastered the art of making people feel special, valued, chosen. My voice carried perfectly through the sound system. He has this incredible ability to compartmentalize his life, to make each person in his orbit feel like they're the only one that matters. Ben's smile faltered slightly. Maybe he was picking up on something in my tone, or maybe it was just the formal setting making him nervous. Either way, I pressed on. Which brings me to tonight's real purpose, I said, gripping the microphone stand. I wanted to share our story with all of Ben's colleagues, the people who know him best in his professional life, because I've learned that Ben brings the same creativity to his personal relationships that he does to his work projects. The room stayed quiet. Polite attention still focused my way. Ben shifted in his chair, but he was trapped by social convention. Walking out during his girlfriend's speech would look terrible in front of his entire company. You see, Ben has this amazing talent for multitasking, for managing multiple projects simultaneously, and I have to admire his organizational skills, keeping track of different schedules, different commitments, different promises to different people. That's when I saw her, fourth table back, blonde hair catching the light, wearing a navy dress I recognized from Ben's Instagram stories. Rebecca from accounting, the same Rebecca whose name kept popping up in conversations, the same Rebecca who apparently worked late on the same nights Ben did. She was watching me with growing confusion, like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Ben, sweetheart, could you stand up? I asked sweetly. I want everyone to see the man I'm talking about. He stood slowly, his public persona still intact but his eyes showing the first real hint of panic. 300 people turned to look at him, including Rebecca, who was staring directly at his face now. And that's when everything went sideways in the most beautiful way possible. Excuse me, Rebecca called out, her voice carrying across the quiet room. She was standing now, her face flushed but determined. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. The entire ballroom turned toward her. You could hear a pin drop. Ben's face went completely white. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger, because I thought Ben was dating me. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 people sat frozen, their heads turning back and forth between Rebecca, Ben, and me, like they were watching a tennis match. Ben stood there looking like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. His boss's mouth actually fell open. The event organizers looked around frantically, clearly not knowing how to handle this situation. I couldn't have scripted it better myself. All those weeks of planning elaborate revenge, and she'd just handed me the perfect moment on a silver platter. Ben's double life was imploding in real time, in front of everyone who mattered in his professional world. Well, I said into the microphone, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. I guess Ben's multitasking skills are even better than I thought. 6 months earlier, I would have laughed if someone told me this story would be my reality. Ben and I had what everyone called the perfect relationship. We met at a coffee shop downtown where I was reading, and he struck up a conversation about my book. Classic meet-cute story that we told at parties, complete with his cheesy line about how he knew I was special because I actually dog-eared the pages. Our routine was comfortable, predictable in the best way. Tuesday movie nights at his apartment, Thursday dinners at my place, weekends split between hiking trails and lazy mornings in bed. He kept a toothbrush at my place. I had a drawer at his. We talked about getting a dog together, maybe moving in after his lease was up. Ben was the kind of guy who remembered details. He'd bring me coffee exactly how I liked it without being asked. When I mentioned wanting to try that new restaurant across town, he'd make reservations the next week. He sent good morning texts and called on his lunch breaks just to hear my voice. My friends adored him. Rachel called him husband material after our first double date. My coworker Stephanie constantly asked when he was going to propose, claiming she could see it in the way he looked at me. Even my normally skeptical mother approved, telling me after Thanksgiving dinner that Ben was a keeper and that she hadn't seen me this happy in years. You two just fit, she'd said, squeezing my hand while we did dishes. It's like you bring out the best in each other. Ben made me feel secure in a way I hadn't experienced before. Previous relationships had been full of games and uncertainty, wondering where I stood or whether the guy was really interested. With Ben, there was none of that. He was direct about his feelings, consistent in his behavior, and made it clear that we were building something together. He'd tell me constantly how much our relationship meant to him. During quiet moments, he'd say things like, I can't imagine doing life without you, or you make everything better. When his work got stressful, he'd joke that coming home to me was the only thing that kept him sane. We had inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. He called me Bookmark because of how we met, and I called him Library because he was always so quiet and thoughtful. Stupid couple nicknames that we used in texts and whispered to each other in public places. The kind of thing that would have made me roll my eyes coming from other people. Ben talked about the future like it was a given that I'd be in it. He'd mention concerts happening months away, asking if I wanted to get tickets. He brought up vacation ideas for next summer, bookmarking places online and sending me links, weeks. When his company announced they were expanding to a new location, he immediately started researching apartments in that area, asking what I thought about the neighborhoods. The trust between us felt absolute. I never worried about where he was or who he was with. When he worked late, I'd text him dinner suggestions for when he got home. When he went out with his work friends, I'd tell him to have fun and not worry about checking in. I had his passwords, not because I asked for them, but because he'd casually give them to me when he needed me to check something on his phone or laptop. Looking back, maybe that complete trust made me careless. I stopped paying attention to the small changes that might have tipped me off earlier. Or maybe Ben was just that good at compartmentalizing, keeping his two worlds so separate that there was no overlap for me to notice. Either way, for those first 18 months, I genuinely believed I'd found my person. The relationship felt effortless, like we were perfectly matched. Our friends treated us like the couple they all aspired to be. We were invited to everything together, assumed to be a package deal, the kind of partnership that made single people both envious and hopeful. Ben seemed just as invested as I was. He'd bring up moving in together unprompted, talking about which of our furniture we'd keep and which we'd donate. He mentioned wanting to meet my extended family, asking about my cousin's wedding in the spring and whether I thought it was too early for him to come as my date. The security I felt in that relationship was unlike anything I'd experienced. I stopped second-guessing every interaction or looking for hidden meanings in his texts. I trusted him completely, and more importantly, I trusted us. Whatever challenges came up, I knew we'd handle them together. The foundation felt that solid. Ben's phone buzzed against the coffee table and he immediately flipped it face down. I was getting up to refill my wine glass when I noticed him glance at it, then at me, then quickly turn his attention back to the movie we were watching. "Who was that?" I asked casually, settling back onto the couch next to him. "Just work stuff," he said without looking away from the TV. "You know how crazy things have been lately." It was a Tuesday night in February, about 4 months before that company event. I didn't think much of it then. Ben's job in project management meant he got messages at weird hours sometimes, especially when they were dealing with tight deadlines. But then it happened again on Thursday, and Saturday morning, and Sunday during brunch with my parents. Always the same pattern. Phone buzzes, Ben checks it when he thinks I'm not looking, flips it face down, dismisses it as work when I ask, "Your boss really needs to learn about work-life balance," I joked after the third interruption during our Sunday brunch. My dad laughed and made some comment about corporate culture these days. Ben forced a smile. "Tell me about it. I keep saying I need to set better boundaries, but you know how it is." Except I didn't know how it was, because in 18 months together, his work had never been this intrusive. Sure, he'd gotten the occasional urgent email or had to take a call during dinner, but this constant buzzing was new. And there was something different about how he handled it, like he was being extra careful not to let me see the screen. "Maybe you should talk to HR, I suggested. If they're expecting you to be available 24/7, that's not fair." "It's not that bad," Ben said quickly. "Just a busy period. It'll calm down soon." But it didn't calm down. If anything, it got worse. The messages came more frequently, and Ben's reactions became more obvious. He'd practically lunge for his phone when it buzzed, or angle his body away from me while he read whatever was on the screen. Sometimes he'd even step into the kitchen or bathroom to respond. When I brought it up again a few weeks later, his response was different. "You're being paranoid," he said, not looking up from his laptop. We were at his place, and I just commented on how he'd gotten up to answer a text in the other room. "It's work. That's what work looks like sometimes." "I'm not being paranoid," I said. "I'm just noticing that you're getting a lot more messages than usual and you're being weird about them." He finally looked at me, and there was irritation in his expression that I'd never seen directed at me before. "Weird how? Like you're hiding them from me. You never used to care if I saw your phone screen." "Maybe because I never had a girlfriend who watched my every move before," he said. The comment stung. In our entire relationship, I'd never been the jealous type. I'd never asked to go through his phone or questioned him about where he'd been. I trusted him completely, and I thought he knew that. "That's not fair," I said. "I'm not watching your every move. I just think it's strange that you suddenly can't answer work messages in front of me." Ben sighed and closed his laptop. "Look, some of this stuff is confidential, okay? There are client issues I can't discuss even with you. I'm just trying to be professional." It was a reasonable explanation. I wanted to believe it, but something about the way he said it, the way he was looking at me like I was being unreasonable, made me feel off balance. "I'm not asking you to discuss anything," I said. "I just noticed the pattern." "What pattern?" His voice had an edge now. "Getting work messages? Having a demanding job? Sorry if that bothers you." I stared at him. This wasn't the Ben I knew. The Ben I knew didn't get defensive like this, didn't twist my words or make me feel like I was being unreasonable for bringing up something that concerned me. "It doesn't bother me that you have a demanding job," I said carefully. "What bothers me is that you're acting like I'm crazy for noticing that something's different." "Nothing's different except that you're suddenly keeping track of when my phone goes off." "I'm not keeping track of anything, Ben. You just what? Want to monitor my communication? Want to know every person I talk to and when?" I felt like he'd slapped me. In 18 months together, we'd never fought like this. We'd had disagreements, sure, but nothing where he'd made me feel like I was being controlling or unreasonable, and certainly nothing where he'd put words in my mouth that were so far from what I'd actually said. "That's not what I want at all," I said quietly. "I'm sorry I brought it up." Ben's expression softened immediately. "Hey, no, I'm sorry. I'm just stressed about work and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." He reached for my hand and his touch was warm and familiar. For a moment, everything felt normal again. "I know you're not trying to monitor me or anything," he continued. "I guess I'm just feeling pressure from all sides right now and I overreacted. Can we forget about it?" I wanted to forget about it. I wanted to go back to how things were before I'd noticed the phone pattern, before this weird fight that had come out of nowhere. So I squeezed his hand and said yes. we could forget about it. But I couldn't actually forget about it, because the phone thing didn't stop, and now Ben's explanations came with a defensiveness that made me feel like I was walking on eggshells. When I mentioned that he seemed distracted during our movie night, he accused me of being clingy. When I asked why he'd stepped away to take a call during dinner, he said I was being insecure. These weren't words Ben had ever used to describe me before. I'd always been independent, confident, trusting, but somehow in the span of a few weeks, I'd apparently become clingy and insecure and paranoid, at least according to him. She's being a little intense lately, Ben said to his friend Ryan during a barbecue at Ryan's place. I was coming back from the bathroom when I heard it through the sliding door. They were standing by the grill, and Ben didn't know I could hear him. Intense how? Ryan asked. Just questioning everything I do. Getting upset about work messages. You know how some women get. I stopped walking. Some women? That phrase hit me like ice water. This was Ben talking about me to his friends like I was some stereotype instead of the person who'd been nothing but supportive for almost 2 years. That sucks, man, Ryan replied. Tiffany went through a phase like that. Always asking where I'd been, who I was texting, drove me crazy. Yeah, exactly. I love her, but she's making everything into a big deal lately. I can't even check my phone without getting the 3rd degree. I stood there frozen, listening to Ben paint me as some jealous girlfriend who monitored his every move. None of what he was saying was true. I'd asked about his phone maybe 3 times total, and only because his behavior around it had become so obviously weird. When I rejoined the group, Ben put his arm around me like nothing had happened. There she is, he said warmly. We were just talking about planning a guy's weekend. Ryan's thinking about renting a cabin. I smiled and nodded, but inside I was reeling. How long had he been talking about me like this behind my back? What other conversations had there been that I didn't know about? Later that week, we were out with another couple, and Ben told a story that made me look ridiculous. He described how I'd freaked out over him getting work messages during our movie night, painting it like I'd had some kind of meltdown. His friends laughed, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. You didn't freak out, I said quietly. I just mentioned that you were getting a lot of messages. Same thing, Ben said with a laugh. You got all worked up about it. I didn't get worked up, I was just... See? Ben said to our friends. She's still upset about it. The conversation moved on, but I sat there feeling like I'd been thrown under a bus. Ben had taken a reasonable concern and twisted it into evidence that I was unstable. And now our friends thought I was some neurotic girlfriend who couldn't handle her boyfriend having a job. This became his pattern. Whenever I brought up something that bothered me, he'd find a way to make it sound unreasonable when he retold it to other people. If I mentioned that he seemed distant, he'd tell people I was needy. If I asked about his plans for the weekend, he'd describe me as controlling to his coworkers. You know how girlfriends can be, he said to his friend Marcus during a double date, always wanting to know every detail of your schedule. Except I'd only asked because he'd mentioned maybe going hiking and I was hoping to join him. But the way he told it, I sounded like some paranoid person who demanded a minute-by-minute itinerary. The worst part was how he'd act completely normal when we were alone together. He'd be affectionate, tell me he loved me, make plans for our future, but then I'd hear him talking to someone else and realize he was building this whole narrative about me being difficult and demanding. I think she's going through something, he told his sister on a phone call I accidentally overheard. She's been really emotional lately, getting upset over nothing. Emotional? Getting upset over nothing? I'd brought up exactly 2 concerns in the past month. The phone thing and the fact that he'd canceled our date night 3 times in a row. Neither of those seemed like nothing to me. When I confronted him about what I'd overheard, he turned it around on me again. So now you're eavesdropping on my private conversations, he said. That's exactly what I'm talking about, this paranoid behavior. I wasn't eavesdropping. You were on the phone in the living room while I was in the kitchen. I couldn't help but hear. Right, so you stood there and listened instead of giving me privacy. I heard one sentence and then came to ask you about it. That's not eavesdropping. It's invasive, Ben said. And the fact that you're making a big deal out of me venting to my sister just proves my point. I felt like I was losing my mind. Somehow every conversation ended with me being the problem. I'd bring up something that concerned me, and by the end of the discussion, I was the one apologizing for being unreasonable. Our friends started treating me differently too. At group dinners, they'd exchange glances when I spoke up about anything. When I mentioned being tired because Ben had kept me up late with work calls, Rachel said, "Oh, you're not still on that work thing, are you? Still on that work thing?" Like my concern about his behavior was some obsession I needed to get over instead of a legitimate issue that had never been addressed. I just think Ben works really hard, Rachel continued. You should be proud that he's so dedicated. I wanted to scream. Of course I was proud of his work ethic. That wasn't the issue. The issue was the secretiveness, the defensive reactions, the way he made me feel crazy for noticing obvious changes in his behavior. But now, thanks to Ben's version of events, everyone thought I was some unreasonable girlfriend who couldn't handle dating someone with a demanding job. They saw me as the problem, not him. Ben had successfully rewritten our relationship dynamic in everyone else's minds. According to the story he'd constructed, I was clingy, paranoid, emotional, and demanding. He was the long-suffering boyfriend dealing with an increasingly difficult girlfriend who couldn't be satisfied no matter what he did. The isolation was devastating. I couldn't talk to our mutual friends about what was happening because they already saw me as the unreasonable one. When I tried to explain my side, it just reinforced their perception that I was being dramatic about nothing. Even worse, I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was reading too much into normal work messages and regular phone usage. Maybe the problem really was me being too sensitive, too needy, too demanding of his time and attention. Ben's gaslighting had become so thorough that I wasn't sure I could trust my own perceptions anymore. Ben told me he was working late again on a Thursday night in April. 3rd time that week. I was making dinner when he called around 6 to say he'd be home after 9. Maybe 10 if the client meeting ran long. Which client? I asked, stirring pasta sauce and trying to sound casual. The Morrison account. You know, that big project I've been telling you about. Except Ben had never mentioned any Morrison account. In 2 years together, he'd told me about dozens of his work projects. But Morrison wasn't one of them. I would have remembered because my college roommate's last name was Morrison. Right, I said. That's the... what kind of project again? Marketing campaign overhaul. Look, I should go. They're starting the meeting. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood there holding my phone, replaying the conversation. Either Ben had mentioned this Morrison project and I'd somehow forgotten completely, or he just made up a client name on the spot. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it nagged at me through dinner and my evening TV show. When Ben came home around 10:30, he looked tired, but not stressed like he usually did after difficult client meetings. If anything, he seemed upbeat. How'd it go? I asked. Good. Really good, actually. I think we're finally making progress. That's great. What did Morrison think of your ideas? Ben paused for just a second too long. They loved them. Couldn't be happier. He went straight to shower, humming under his breath. I'd never seen him hum after a late work meeting before. Usually he was exhausted and complained about how demanding his clients were. The next week brought another inconsistency. Ben said he had to work Saturday morning to finish a presentation, but when I called his office around noon to see if he wanted me to bring him lunch, the security guard said the building was closed on weekends except for emergencies. No one's been in or out today, he told me. Building's locked up tight. When Ben came home that afternoon, I asked how his morning went. Productive, he said. Got a lot done in the quiet office? I didn't challenge him directly. Instead, I started paying closer attention to the details of his stories. The more I listened, the more holes I found. He'd mention working with colleagues I'd never heard of before. He'd describe meetings in conference rooms that didn't exist, according to his company's website floor plan. He'd reference projects with timelines that didn't make sense, like saying he was presenting final ideas for something he'd supposedly just been assigned. But the biggest clue came from an unexpected source. I was getting coffee near Ben's office building one Tuesday when I bumped into his coworker Stephanie. We'd met several times at company parties, and she always seemed friendly. How are you doing? She asked while we waited in line. I feel like I haven't seen you at any of the work events lately. Yeah, Ben's been so busy with that big Morrison project. I barely see him myself these days. Stephanie looked confused. Morrison project? The marketing campaign overhaul? He's been working late almost every night this month. I don't think we have any clients named Morrison, Stephanie said slowly. And Ben hasn't been working late. He's been leaving right at 5 most days. I know, because his desk is across from mine. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot. I tried to keep my expression neutral. Oh, maybe I got the name wrong. There are so many projects. Maybe, Stephanie said, but she was looking at me strangely. I hope everything's okay. Everything was definitely not okay. Ben had been lying about where he was spending his evenings, lying about client names, lying about working late. And if Stephanie was right about him leaving at 5, that meant he had several hours unaccounted for before he came home each night. I started noticing other things. Ben would come home smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He'd have receipts in his pockets from restaurants I'd never been to. His car would have extra mileage that didn't match the direct route between his office and home. One evening, I watched him texting someone while we were having dinner. He was smiling at whatever he was reading, a soft smile I recognized as the one he used to give me in our early dating days. Good news? I asked. He immediately flipped his phone over. Just work stuff, but I'd seen enough of the screen to catch a name. Rebecca. I'd heard that name before, in passing conversations with Ben's coworkers. She worked in accounting, young, blonde, recently divorced according to office gossip, and now she was apparently texting Ben things that made him smile like that. I started connecting dots I'd been trying to ignore. The mysterious evening hours when Ben wasn't actually at work, the defensive behavior around his phone, the constant buzzing messages that he claimed were from clients who apparently didn't exist. Ben was cheating on me, with Rebecca from accounting. The realization hit me like a physical blow, but it was also oddly liberating. I wasn't paranoid or oversensitive or any of the things Ben had been calling me. My instincts had been right all along. There really was something to be suspicious about. For weeks, I'd been questioning my own sanity, wondering if I was imagining problems that didn't exist. But I hadn't been imagining anything. Ben really was acting differently, really was being secretive, really was lying about where he spent his time. All those fights where he'd made me feel unreasonable for asking basic questions about his day, he'd been gaslighting me to cover up his affair. All those comments to friends about me being clingy and paranoid, he'd been building a narrative to explain away any suspicions I might voice. I thought about confronting him directly, demanding the truth and giving him a chance to come clean, but I already knew how that would go. He'd deny everything, twist my words, make me out to be the crazy girlfriend who was imagining things. He'd probably have some explanation for every inconsistency I'd noticed, some way to make me doubt myself again. Ben had shown me exactly who he was over the past few months. He was a liar and a manipulator who was perfectly willing to make me question my own reality to protect his secret. He'd systematically undermined my confidence and isolated me from our friends, all so he could carry on his affair in peace. I wasn't going to give him another chance to gaslight me or make excuses. I was done being the reasonable one, done trying to save a relationship with someone who clearly had no respect for me. But I also wasn't going to just walk away quietly. Ben had spent months making me look like the problem to everyone we knew. He'd painted me as unstable, paranoid, and difficult while he played the role of the patient, long-suffering boyfriend. If he wanted to play games, I could play games too. And I was going to make sure that when this was over, everyone would see exactly who Ben really was. I started with lunch deliveries. Every Tuesday for 3 weeks, I showed up at Ben's office with elaborate meals from expensive restaurants, complete with handwritten notes about what a devoted and trustworthy boyfriend he was. I made sure to arrive during peak lunch hours when the most people would see me in the lobby, chatting loudly with the receptionist about how lucky I was to have such a faithful partner. He's been working so hard on all these projects. I'd tell anyone within earshot. I just want to make sure everyone knows how much I appreciate his dedication to our relationship. The receptionist started recognizing me, smiling whenever I walked in with another delivery. Other employees began to take notice too. I caught a few of them whispering and pointing when they saw me, clearly wondering about the girlfriend who was so publicly devoted to Ben Crawford. Then came the flowers. Massive bouquets delivered every Friday afternoon, right when the accounting department was busiest. I specifically requested they be brought directly to Ben's desk, not left at reception. I wanted Rebecca to see them up close, to read the cards that gushed about our unbreakable bond and my complete trust in him. Ben called me after the third delivery, his voice strained. The flowers are really a lot. People are starting to comment. I hope they're saying nice things, I replied sweetly. I want everyone to know how serious we are about each other, especially the people you work closely with every day. What do you mean by that? Oh, nothing specific. I just think it's important that your colleagues understand you're completely committed to our relationship. You know how office environments can be with all those rumors and temptations? The silence on his end told me everything I needed to know. He was panicking, trying to figure out how to manage the situation without seeming ungrateful for his girlfriend's romantic gestures. But my masterpiece was the banner, 6 feet wide, mounted prominently in the main lobby where every single person entering the building would see it. The photo was from our anniversary dinner, both of us smiling broadly, with text that read, "Congratulations to my faithful boyfriend, Ben Crawford, on so amazing years together," in bright pink letters surrounded by hearts. I paid extra to have it installed on a Monday morning before business hours, then positioned myself in the coffee shop across the street to watch the reactions. Ben arrived at his usual time, stopped dead when he saw it, and stood frozen for a full 2 minutes while other employees walked past, some pointing, others taking photos with their phones. Rebecca showed up 20 minutes later. I watched her face go white when she spotted the banner, then frantically look around to see who else was noticing her reaction. She practically sprinted to the elevators. My phone rang before 9 a.m. "What is that thing in the lobby?" Ben's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "A celebration of our relationship," I said cheerfully. "Don't you love it? I wanted everyone to see how happy we are together. 2 whole years of complete faithfulness and trust." "How long is it staying up?" "I paid for 6 weeks. I figured that would give everyone plenty of time to appreciate it. Your coworkers will see it every single day when they come to work. Isn't that wonderful?" He couldn't argue without looking like a terrible boyfriend who didn't appreciate his girlfriend's romantic gesture. The banner stayed up, and I watched from across the street as Ben started using the side entrance to avoid walking past it. The group dinner was next. I organized it at his favorite restaurant and made sure to invite his entire project team, including Rebecca. During the main course, I stood up with my wine glass. "I want to propose a toast," I announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "To my incredible boyfriend Ben, who has shown me what real loyalty looks like. In our 2 years together, he's never given me a single reason to doubt his commitment or question his honesty." I looked directly at Rebecca while I spoke. She was staring down at her plate, her face flushed red. "Ben has taught me that when you find the right person, you don't need to look anywhere else. You don't need to keep your options open or maintain relationships that cross boundaries. You just focus completely on the person you love." The table applauded politely, but the tension was obvious. Ben's smile looked painful, and Rebecca excused herself to the bathroom immediately after my toast. "And I especially want to thank all of Ben's wonderful coworkers," I continued before sitting down. "It means so much to know he's surrounded by people who respect relationships and would never interfere with something so special." Rebecca returned to the table 5 minutes later, but barely spoke for the rest of the evening. She left early, claiming she had a headache. The final piece was the company annual event. I'd contacted the organizers weeks in advance, explaining that I wanted to surprise Ben with a public appreciation speech. They were thrilled by the idea of adding a romantic element to the evening's program. I spent hours crafting that speech, every word designed to create maximum discomfort while maintaining the facade of a loving tribute. I practiced my delivery until it was perfect, knowing I'd only get one shot at this. The night of the event, the hotel ballroom buzzed with conversation, as 300 employees filled the round tables. Ben looked nervous from the moment he saw me there, especially when I mentioned having a special surprise planned for the evening. Throughout dinner, I played the devoted girlfriend perfectly, chatting warmly with his colleagues and making sure everyone at our table knew how proud I was of Ben's dedication and honesty. I caught him glancing around the room repeatedly, probably looking for Rebecca and trying to figure out how to manage whatever was coming. When the event organizers called me to the microphone for Ben's appreciation ceremony, his face went completely pale. I walked confidently to the stage, looking out at all the faces that had heard Ben's version of our relationship drama over the past months. The microphone feedback squealed as I adjusted it, and the room fell quiet. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I'm here tonight to talk about someone very special to me, someone whose loyalty and honesty have shaped our relationship in ways I never expected." I could see Ben sitting rigidly at our front table, his hands clenched in his lap. 300 people were focused on me, expecting a typical romantic tribute. Ben Crawford has been in my life for 2 years, and in that time, he's shown me exactly who he really is. His dedication to his work here is remarkable. He stays late so many nights, puts in weekend hours, always talking about projects and colleagues. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the audience until I found Rebecca sitting at a table near the back. She was staring at me with growing alarm. His communication skills are truly something to behold. Ben can make anyone believe anything he says. He's mastered the art of making people feel special, valued, chosen. My tone was still warm and appreciative, but something in my delivery made the room feel tense, which brings me to why I wanted to speak tonight. I've learned so much about Ben through his relationships with all of you, his colleagues, especially those of you who've gotten to know him really well. Rebecca's face had gone white. She was looking back and forth between me and Ben like a trapped animal. You see, Ben has this incredible talent for multitasking, for managing multiple projects simultaneously, and I have to admire his organizational skills, keeping track of different schedules, different commitments, different promises to different people. The room was completely silent now. People were starting to sense that something was wrong, though they couldn't quite figure out what. "Ben, sweetheart, could you stand up?" I asked sweetly. "I want everyone to see the man I'm talking about." He stood slowly, his face red with humiliation and panic. Every eye in the room turned toward him, including Rebecca's. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd I'd like you to meet my boyfriend of 2 years, Ben Crawford. The same Ben Crawford who, according to his other girlfriend Rebecca, has been dating her for the past 8 months. The silence that followed was deafening. 300 people sat frozen, their heads turning between me, Ben, and Rebecca like they were watching a tennis match in slow motion. That's when Rebecca stood up from her table near the back. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there's been some kind of mistake here." The entire ballroom turned toward her. Ben looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger as the adrenaline kicked in. "Because I thought Ben was dating me." The explosion that followed was everything I'd hoped for and more. Rebecca and I both walked away from that microphone without saying another word to Ben, leaving him standing alone at his table while 300 of his co-workers processed what they'd just witnessed. The room erupted in whispers and shocked conversations as people pulled out their phones to text friends who weren't there. Within hours, the story had spread beyond the company. Ben's humiliation wasn't just professional, it was social media gold. Videos of the confrontation started appearing online, shared by employees who'd recorded the dramatic moment. The story went viral in their professional circles, making Ben infamous as the guy who got exposed by both girlfriends at the company party. Rebecca and I ended up in the hotel bar afterward, both of us still processing what had happened. She bought me a drink and told me her side of the story. Ben had fed her the same lies he'd told everyone else, that I was his crazy ex who wouldn't let go, that we were basically over, and he was just waiting for the right time to make it official. "He showed me texts that supposedly proved you were stalking him," she said, shaking her head. "I actually felt sorry for him. He made you sound completely unhinged." "He told our friends I was paranoid and controlling," I replied. "Made me question my own sanity for months. We didn't become best friends or anything, but we did stay in touch long enough for me to hear about the aftermath." Rebecca broke up with him that night, obviously. She also made sure everyone in the accounting department knew exactly what kind of person Ben really was. The professional consequences were swift and brutal. By the following Monday, everyone at his company knew the story. His boss called him in for a meeting about maintaining professional boundaries and representing the company appropriately. His coworkers stopped including him in lunch plans and after-work drinks. The banner in the lobby became a daily reminder of his humiliation until building management finally took it down. But the social destruction was even more complete. Our mutual friends, the ones who'd spent months listening to Ben paint me as the unreasonable girlfriend, suddenly understood what had really been happening. They realized they'd been manipulated just like I had, fed a carefully constructed narrative designed to make Ben look like the victim. Rachel called me a week later, apologetic and embarrassed. "I can't believe I fell for his act," she said. "Looking back, it's so obvious he was lying. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." Other friends reached out with similar apologies. They'd all heard different versions of the same story, that I was clingy, paranoid, making problems where none existed. Now they understood that Ben had been systematically undermining me to cover up his own betrayal. The isolation Ben had tried to create around me rebounded on him completely. Word spread through our entire social circle about what he'd done. People who'd known him for years started questioning everything they thought they knew about his character. Invitations to parties and gatherings stopped coming. His reputation went from reliable guy to manipulative liar who can't be trusted. 3 months later, I ran into Stephanie from his office at that same coffee shop where this all started. She filled me in on how Ben was doing professionally. "He's basically a pariah now," she said. "Nobody talks to him unless it's absolutely necessary for work. He eats lunch alone every day. I heard he's been applying for jobs at other companies, but somehow word keeps getting around about what happened." "How's Rebecca doing?" I asked. "She's fine. Actually, she got promoted to senior accountant last month. Everyone respects her for how she handled the situation. She stood up in front of the whole company and told the truth, even though it was mortifying for her too." Stephanie paused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "You know what the weirdest part is? Ben still acts like he's the victim in all this. He tells anyone who'll listen that you ambushed him and ruined his life over a misunderstanding. He genuinely seems to believe that what he did wasn't that bad." That didn't surprise me. Ben had spent so long manipulating reality to suit his needs that he probably couldn't even see his own behavior clearly anymore. In his mind, he was still the good guy who'd been unfairly attacked by his crazy ex-girlfriend. I never heard from Ben directly again. He tried calling and texting for a few weeks after the event, alternating between apologies and accusations, but I blocked his number and all his social media accounts. I had no interest in giving him another opportunity to gaslight me or rewrite history. The best part wasn't just that he faced consequences, it was that everyone finally saw through his manipulation. All those people who'd believed his version of events, who'd treated me like I was the problem, now understood exactly who Ben really was. His carefully constructed image as the patient, long-suffering boyfriend had crumbled completely, and there was no putting it back together. I heard through friends that he'd finally found a new job in another city. Apparently, he'd given up trying to rebuild his reputation locally and decided to start fresh somewhere else. I hoped he'd learned something from the experience, but based on what Stephanie had told me about his continued victim mentality, I doubted it. For me, the whole ordeal became a crash course in trusting my own instincts. Ben had spent months making me doubt my own perceptions, convincing me that my reasonable concerns were actually signs of my own instability. I'd learned the hard way that when someone consistently makes you question your own reality, that's not love, that's manipulation. The revenge had been satisfying, but the real victory was getting my confidence back and never letting anyone play me again.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.